What's up, everybody, and welcome back to After the Snap. I'm your host, Tasha Pierce, and I'm coming at you with another movie review. Today's movie is the Antoine Fuqua directed movie that stars Jake Gyllenhaal, and it is called The Guilty. This is a remake of a Danish film of the same name that's translated into The Guilty. I think it's Den Skeldage. I hope I'm saying that right. Somebody let me know. But that is the original Danish name. And yeah, if you'd like to know exactly what I thought of this remake, then let's go. Okay, so told you at the top that this movie was directed by Antoine Fuqua, and y'all know who that is. Antoine Fuqua has given us Training Day, The Replacement Killers, Tears of the Sun, King Arthur, Shooter, Brooklyn's Finest, Olympus Has Fallen, The Equalizers, so and so and so and so. He's just freaking spectacular director. And Jake Gyllenhaal was the star, and y'all know who Jake Gyllenhaal is. I don't have to list his filmography. He is a household name. One of the big things I think was a Brokeback Mountain. We got him in Spider-Man: Far From Home. We got two powerhouses, a powerhouse director and a powerhouse actor. So what kind of movie did we get? What is The Guilty? It's a Danish remake of a film called The Guilty. And it was highly acclaimed as a Danish movie. This movie was shot in 11 days because of COVID. It was shot during the October period last year of the pandemic. And somebody kind of close to Antoine Fuqua tested positive days before the film began shooting. So he, of course, Antoine Fuqua had to isolate. So one of the things I wish I would have known before I watched this movie and before I rated it and I said my feelings, because I've already posted reviews on Rotten Tomatoes and other places without knowing this little piece of information. Antoine Fuqua directed that entire film from a van with monitors. He was not on the soundstage with the actors. And that is like having to play basketball with one arm tied behind your back. You know, it does create a bit of a handicap in how much interaction, how many of the small details that you would normally be right on top of as a director, how many of those that you have to see secondhand from this monitor. So I'm saying this because I wasn't particularly fond of this movie. Spoiler alert. It was written by Nick Pizzolatto. He wrote the screenplay. The original writers were Gustav Muller and Emil Nygaard Albertsen. Those were the people who wrote the Danish version of this. Of course, starring Jake Gyllenhaal. There are other notable names, but I'll get into why I only named Jake Gyllenhaal in just a moment. The release date was September 24th, 2021. It went straight to, I think it had a limited theatrical release, and it was entered into a couple of those film festivals, but we got it on Netflix on September 24th, 2021. Has a runtime of 1 hour and 30 minutes. And now let's get into what I thought of this movie. First, let's talk about the synopsis. A demoted police officer assigned to a call dispatch desk is conflicted when he receives an emergency phone call from a kidnapped woman. And one of the things that we have to remember, specifically when talking about this movie, is everything is not always what it seems, right? While Jake Gyllenhaal delivered a memorable performance, The Guilty just didn't do it for me. There were tense moments, for sure, but not enough for my total investment into these moments. There were several times that elements were introduced to humanize Joe, but they ultimately ended up making him an even less likable character. I really wanted to like the film, but it left me wanting at the end, and not in a good way. Of course, these things are subjective, but I cannot enthusiastically recommend The Guilty, no matter how stacked the credits. Now, we have this extremely stressed LAPD officer, Joe Baylor, and he's working the night shift at a 911 call center. And this call center is overwhelmed with calls relating to a large wildfire in the Hollywood Hills. He's also awaiting a hearing for an undisclosed incident that occurred while he was on duty as a police officer some 8 months earlier. But he hopes to return to the beat. He wants to get back on the streets after this hearing. As luck would have it, we meet Joe the day before said hearing. Joe fields the emergency phone calls, and he does it kind of with an attitude. He's really only there to satisfy the desk duty requirement for before he can get back on the streets. Of course, while he's fielding these calls at this call center, he's getting phone calls at work. Many of these phone calls are from a Los Angeles Times reporter who just wants a statement about the incident which he was involved in. And that tells us it's salacious enough for the press to be interested. So whatever he did was newsworthy in LA. After telling the reporter to take a long walk on a short pier, Joe gets another call from a person who's really in trouble. Emily Lighton is on the other end of this emergency request, and this call is going to change the course of Joe's shift and his life. It's obvious the young woman can't talk freely, so Joe deduces that she's been kidnapped and is in a vehicle with her abductor. So he starts to ask her yes or no questions and learns that they're in a white van on the freeway. Eventually, the abductor catches on to what's going on, and Emily has to hang up before she was able to provide any other details, like where they were on the freeway. So Joe only knows white van, woman with a male abductor, and they're on the freeway. So Joe relays the information to the California Highway Patrol, but they are unable to locate the van because they don't have enough info. You can't stop every white van on the freeway. Although Joe has been in the field as an officer, he is somehow pissed off that the dispatcher for CHP is not helping him enough. So Joe does a little bit more detective work. He calls Emily's home phone number, and he speaks to her very, very young daughter named Abby. Now, Abby tells Joe that her mom was taken by her ex-husband, Henry Fisher. She also gives him Henry's phone number, and he uses it, of course, to get the license plate of this van. So yeah, Joe did some outstanding detective work in this moment, and he relayed the plate number to the CHP. Then he sent a patrol car to the home of Emily Lighton to check on Abby and her baby brother Oliver, who were both home alone. So everything seems very straightforward until we're thrown a curveball. And of course, I'm not going to spoil this movie, so I will not tell you what the curveball was. And while the twist was a big one, by the time we get to it, I was already bored out of my freaking mind. We've spent almost the entire run of this movie in the call center with Joe at his station. And while this is an interesting location in theory, it just didn't work for me in practice. There's only so much Gyllenhaal can do with his vocal inflections and his facial expressions as he works the phones as Joe. And let me tell you, he did an outstanding job. Trust and believe, Jake Gyllenhaal can do far more with his face and his vocal inflections than I can. We do learn a few things about Joe. First of all, he's a hothead. He's impulsive. He's very quick to act on very little information. And all these things make me really dislike his character. And even though his world has been changed by the end of the film, and you feel like he's become a different person, I still didn't care because I just didn't care for the character at all. This is one of those cases that I sided more with the audience on Rotten Tomatoes than the critics. I gave The Guilty a 2 out of 5. The audience said 47%, and the critics really loved it, giving it a 72%. And again, the names behind the voices that Joe is interacting with on his shift at this call center, there's some big names, some huge names. Namely, let's say Ethan Hawke is one of them, and that to me, it's like this. The credits were stacked. There's no reason. I wasn't feeling this one room claustrophobic kind of atmosphere being at work with Joe for this entire run of this movie. And while it may have worked for the Danish movie, which I have not seen, I just didn't feel like it worked very well here. So those are my thoughts. If you've watched The Guilty and you felt some type of way, put those thoughts down in the comments below. And before I do anything else, you see I'm already bouncing because I'm going to put that funky music on for my patrons. Thank you, patrons, for supporting the show continuously. Gosh, you guys you got the patience of saints. Thank you for continuously supporting me and my endeavors. And if you would like to become a patron, you can do that by visiting patreon.com/Tasha Pierce and choosing a tier, any tier. Some tiers are ridiculous, and I know that there is no way possible that I will get a donor at the $100 a month level, but hey, a girl can dream. The tiers start at $3. So if you've got $3 to spare, I would appreciate you throwing a couple bucks my way to help support what I'm doing here. And I will be eternally grateful, as I am, for you watching and hanging out with me today. Thank you. You could be anywhere in the world, but you're here with me, and I appreciate that. With all that being said, make sure you subscribe, turn your notifications on so you will be prepared for my next video and or live stream, because I do 2 of those a week. But yeah, with all that being said, I've got nothing else. I appreciate you hanging out with me today, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.